I never thought checking my father's old military records would unravel a web of lies that stretched back 15 years. My name is Sabrina Matthews, and this is the story of how a simple phone call to the Department of Defense exposed a betrayal so deep it nearly destroyed what was left of my family and sent a woman I'd never met to federal prison.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of my apartment in Asheville, North Carolina, casting soft shadows across the boxes I still hadn't unpacked. 3 months had passed since I'd moved back from Seattle, returning to the mountains where I had grown up, yet somehow I still couldn't bring myself to make this place feel like home. Maybe because home had never really felt like home since Dad died. I sat at my small kitchen table, nursing my second cup of coffee, staring at the envelope that had arrived yesterday. The return address read, Department of Veterans Affairs, in official block letters. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it for the third time, rereading the letter that made absolutely no sense. Dear Ms. Matthews, regarding your inquiry about Private First Class Daniel Matthews, deceased, our records indicate that survivor benefits for the aforementioned service member are currently being dispersed to the designated beneficiary. No additional claims can be processed at this time. The thing was, I hadn't made any inquiry. And more confusing, my mother, Linda Matthews Harrison, had never received a single penny in survivor benefits after Dad died in Afghanistan in 2009. She'd remarried my stepfather, Robert Harrison, 5 years ago, but before that, she'd struggled alone to raise me on her teacher's salary. I grabbed my phone and called Mom for the 4th time that week. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm, but tinged with the exhaustion that came from wrangling 25 third graders all day. Sabrina, honey, I told you, I never applied for any benefits. After your father died, I was so overwhelmed with grief and trying to keep you stable that I just never pursued it. The military gave us the death benefit, the life insurance, and I thought that was everything. Her voice cracked slightly. Maybe I should have looked into it more, but I couldn't bear dealing with all that paperwork, all those reminders. Mom, someone is collecting Dad's benefits. The VA just confirmed it. There was a long pause. I could hear the sounds of her classroom in the background, construction paper being cut, the distant laughter of children at recess. That's impossible, she finally said. Who would even have the authority to claim them? That was exactly what I intended to find out. After we hung up, I pulled out the box I'd been avoiding since the move. Dad's military records, awards, and personal effects. The bronze star gleamed in its case, the purple heart beside it. There were letters, photographs, and his dog tags on their worn chain. At the bottom, I found his DD-14, the official discharge papers, and his marriage certificate to my mother, dated June 15, 1991, at the courthouse in Raleigh. I had just finished my master's degree in forensic accounting, and if there was one thing I'd learned, it's that numbers don't lie. People do. And someone was lying about my father's benefits. The next morning, I walked into the gleaming offices of Henderson and Associates, where I'd just started as a junior analyst. My supervisor, Margaret Chen, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd made her career uncovering financial fraud. When I hesitantly approached her desk during lunch break, she looked up from her salad with immediate interest. Family matter, I explained, showing her the VA letter. I think someone might be committing fraud using my deceased father's military record. Margaret's eyes narrowed as she read the letter. Sabrina, this is serious. Fraudulent claims for military benefits are federal offenses. Have you contacted the VA's Office of Inspector General? I shook my head. I wanted to understand what I'm dealing with first. I'm his daughter. Don't I have a right to know who's claiming benefits in his name? Absolutely, but you'll need to file a formal request. It could take weeks, maybe months. She paused, studying my face. Unless you want to do some preliminary digging yourself, you have the skills. That evening, I started building a timeline. Dad had enlisted in 1989, deployed to the Gulf War, served honorably for 12 years, and then re-enlisted after 9/11. He'd been killed by an IED outside Kabul on March 17, 2009, when I was just 14 years old. Mom received $400,000 from his life insurance policy, which she'd carefully invested for my college education. But survivor benefits? Those were meant to be monthly payments for the spouse of a fallen service member, payments that could amount to thousands of dollars over the years. I created a spreadsheet calculating what Mom should have received over the past 15 years. The number made me gasp. Potentially over $300,000 in benefits she'd never seen. My phone rang, startling me. It was Mom again. "Sabrina, I was thinking about what you said. There's something. Robert found some papers when we were cleaning out the garage last month. Military papers with your father's name on them. I didn't look at them closely. It was too painful. But they're in a box in our attic. Do you want to come over this weekend?" "I'll be there Saturday morning," I said immediately. That Saturday, I drove the familiar route to Mom and Robert's house in the suburbs of Charlotte. The two-story colonial with its neat lawn and white picket fence had been their home for 4 years, a fresh start after the difficult years following Dad's death. Robert's landscaping business had done well, and they'd built a comfortable life together. Robert Harrison greeted me at the door, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. He was a good man, patient, kind, and he'd never tried to replace my father. He'd simply been there for Mom when she needed someone. "Your mother's got the box ready upstairs," he said, pulling me into a brief hug. "Hope it helps with whatever you're looking for." In the attic, surrounded by the musty smell of old memories and stored Christmas decorations, Mom handed me a dusty cardboard box. Inside were official military documents, records requests, and correspondence I'd never seen before. As I sifted through the papers, one document stopped me cold. It was a copy of a marriage certificate. Daniel Matthews to a woman named Patricia Ellen Reeves, dated October 3rd, 1988, in Jacksonville, North Carolina. My hands went numb. That was 3 years before Dad married Mom. "Mom," I said slowly, "did Dad ever mention being married before?" She looked confused. "No, never. Why?" I showed her the certificate. The color drained from her face. "That's impossible. Danny told me I was his first everything. First love, first wife. We met in 1990, got married in 1991. Her voice trailed off. As she grabbed the paper from my hands, studying it with disbelief. Robert moved closer, his arm around Mom's shoulders. "Linda, breathe. There has to be an explanation." But as I dug deeper into the box, I found more documents. Records of dependent benefits being paid to Patricia Reeves, change of address forms, even a photocopy of what appeared to be a widow's claim application dated just weeks after Dad's death. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture that made my stomach turn. If this marriage certificate was real, if Dad had been married to this Patricia person when he married Mom, then... "Mom," I said carefully, "was there ever a divorce decree? Any paperwork ending this supposed first marriage?" She shook her head mutely, tears starting to stream down her face. "I don't understand. How could he... We had you. We had a life." I kept searching through the documents, and that's when I found it. A letter addressed to Patricia Ellen Reeves at a post office box in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It was from the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, dated 2010, confirming the approval of her survivor benefit application. The woman who might have been my father's first wife, a wife he'd apparently never divorced, had been collecting his military benefits for 15 years, while my mother struggled to make ends meet. And if my father had never divorced Patricia Reeves, that meant my mother's marriage to him had never been legal, which meant I couldn't finish the thought. The implications were too enormous, too devastating. "We need to find this woman," I said, my voice harder than I'd ever heard it before. "We need to find Patricia Reeves and get some answers."
Mom was crying now, and Robert held her close, his own face pale with shock. I gathered the documents carefully, my mind already racing ahead. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my father's secret, my mother's status, and my own identity. As I drove back to Asheville that night, the mountain roads dark and winding, I made a decision. I would use every skill I'd learned, every resource at my disposal to uncover the truth.
And if Patricia Reeves had committed fraud, if she'd knowingly claimed benefits she wasn't entitled to, I would make sure she faced justice. But first, I needed to know the truth about my father. Had he been a bigamist? Had he lived a double life? Or was there something else going on? Some explanation that would make sense of this nightmare? The lights of Asheville appeared in the distance, and I gripped the steering wheel tighter. This was just the beginning. I could feel it in my bones. What I had uncovered was only the surface of something much deeper, much more complex. And somewhere out there, Patricia Reeves was living a life funded by my father's sacrifice, while my mother had suffered in ignorance for 15 years. That was about to change. Tomorrow, I would start making calls. I would file requests. I would follow every lead, trace every document, until I knew the complete truth. My father had died a hero, serving his country. He deserved better than to have his memory tainted by lies and deception. My mother deserved justice, and I deserved to know who my father really was. The road ahead would be difficult, I knew. Uncovering family secrets always was. But I was Daniel Matthews' daughter, and if he'd taught me anything, it was to never back down from a fight, especially when fighting for what's right. As I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Margaret Chen, sent late on a Saturday night. Sabrina, I did some checking. Patricia Reeves is real, and she's been receiving benefits. But there's more. Call me Monday. This goes deeper than you think. I sat in my car, engine off, staring at those words. Deeper than I think. How much deeper could it possibly go? I would find out soon enough, and when I did, nothing would ever be the same again.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. I sat across from Margaret Chen in her corner office, watching as she spread a series of printouts across her mahogany desk. Her expression was grave. I have a contact at the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, Margaret began, adjusting her reading glasses. What I'm about to tell you is unofficial, but I trust my source completely. She tapped one of the documents. Patricia Reeves has been receiving dependency and indemnity compensation, DIC, since June 2009. That's $1,500 monthly, plus annual adjustments. Over 15 years, we're looking at approximately $310,000. The number hung in the air between us. I'd calculated something similar, but hearing it confirmed made it real. But here's where it gets interesting, Margaret continued. According to my contact, there was a red flag in the system 3 years ago. Someone, not your mother, submitted an inquiry about your father's benefit status. The inquiry was dismissed as a clerical error, but it originated from a law office in Virginia. Virginia? I leaned forward. Do we know which firm? Whitman and Associates in Arlington. Small firm, specializes in military benefits law. She pulled up another document on her computer screen. I did some digging. They represented a woman named Jennifer Kessler in a benefits dispute in 2021. The case was settled quietly, sealed records. My mind raced. You think there's a connection? I don't know yet, but there's something else. Margaret's fingers flew across her keyboard. Patricia Reeves has been living in Fayetteville, North Carolina since at least 2008, before your father's death. She works as a registered nurse at Cape Fear Valley Medical Center. Owns a modest home, no other obvious income sources beyond the DIC payments, and her salary. I pulled out my notebook. If she knew my father before he died, if they were in contact, then the marriage certificate might be legitimate, Margaret finished. Which raises the question, did your father know he was committing bigamy? The word stung. Bigamy. My father, a criminal. It couldn't be true. I need to see her. I need to talk to Patricia Reeves face to face. Margaret's expression turned stern. Sabrina, As your supervisor and as someone who cares about you, I strongly advise against that. If this turns into a legal matter, which it very likely will, you don't want to compromise anything by confronting her directly. Then what do you suggest? Let me make some calls. There are proper channels for this. We can request a full audit of the benefits claim, subpoena records if necessary, but we need to be smart about this. She paused, studying my face. How much does your mother know? Just what we found in the box. I haven't told her about the money yet. Good. Keep it that way for now. If your mother's marriage to your father was invalid due to a prior existing marriage, the legal implications are significant, not just for the benefits, but for everything. Inheritance rights, your own legitimacy status, all of it. The weight of her words settled on my shoulders. This wasn't just about uncovering fraud anymore. This was about my entire family's legal standing. That evening, I couldn't focus on anything. I'd promised Mom I'd come over for dinner, but the thought of sitting across from her and Robert, pretending everything was fine, felt impossible. Still, I drove to Charlotte, my mind churning with questions. Robert was grilling steaks on the back patio when I arrived. Mom was in the kitchen, tossing a salad with mechanical movements. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and I knew she'd been crying. Sabrina, she said softly, I've been thinking all weekend. About your father, about everything. There has to be an explanation. Danny wouldn't have lied to me like that. He couldn't have. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know how. Mom, I'm working on finding out the truth. I promise. I called the chapel where we got married, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I spoke to Pastor Williams. He's retired now, but he remembered our wedding. He said Danny seemed genuinely happy, genuinely in love. There was no hesitation, no guilt. How could he have stood there making vows to me if he was already married to someone else? Robert appeared in the doorway, spatula in hand. Linda, maybe we should wait until Sabrina has more information before we... I can't wait, Mom's voice cracked. Every moment I don't know feels like torture. Was my entire marriage a lie? Is my daughter... Are you? She couldn't finish the sentence. I'm still your daughter, I said firmly, moving to embrace her. Nothing changes that. Nothing.
We ate dinner in uncomfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Afterward, Robert pulled me aside in the hallway. There's something I should tell you, he said quietly, glancing toward the kitchen where Mom was loading the dishwasher. Last year, I got a strange phone call. A woman asking about Linda's relationship with Daniel Matthews. She said she was doing research for a veterans memorial project. I didn't think much of it at the time, gave her some basic information that Linda had been Danny's wife, that she died in Afghanistan. But now, with everything that's happened... Did she give you a name? No, but she had a southern accent. Not local, deeper south. Maybe Georgia or Alabama. He frowned. She asked specifically if Linda had remarried, when, whether she'd moved away from the area. I thought it was odd, but she seemed legitimate. A chill ran down my spine. When exactly was this? March, I think. Right around the anniversary of Danny's death. Did you tell Mom about it? Robert shook his head. It seemed like nothing at the time, and Linda gets so emotional around the anniversary anyway. I didn't want to add to her stress. I processed this new information. Someone had been checking on Mom, asking questions. But who? Patricia Reeves herself? Or someone working for her? Robert, I need you to think carefully. Did she ask anything about benefits, about money, about any claims Mom might have made? His eyes widened as understanding dawned. She did. She asked if Linda had received everything she was entitled to, if there were any complications with the benefits process. My God, she was checking to see if Linda was a threat. We stood in the dim hallway, the implications swirling around us. If Patricia Reeves had been monitoring Mom, she knew about the potential challenge to her claim. She'd been one step ahead of us. When I left that night, I had a new determination. I couldn't wait for official channels, couldn't wait for Margaret's careful, methodical approach. Time was critical.
Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and started searching. Patricia Ellen Reeves, 54, lived at 3847 Redwood Drive in Fayetteville. There were photos on social media, a pleasant-looking woman with auburn hair and kind eyes, posing with colleagues from the hospital, at charity events, at what looked like military memorial services. In one photo, she stood beside a memorial wreath with my father's name on it. The caption read, "Always remembered, forever loved. 15 years since you left us, Danny." Danny. She called him Danny, the same name Mom used. The intimacy of it made my stomach turn. I dug deeper, finding her nursing license, her employment history, traces of her life, but there was a gap. No records of her before 1988, the year of the supposed marriage to my father, as if she hadn't existed before that point. My phone buzzed, a text from Margaret. "Don't do anything rash. Meeting set up with VA Inspector General for Friday. We'll handle this properly." But Friday was 4 days away. 4 more days of my mother's suffering. 4 more days of not knowing the truth. I made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow I would drive to Fayetteville. I would go to Cape Fear Medical Center. I would find Patricia Reeves and I would get answers. The rain that had threatened all day finally began to fall, drops spattering against my window like tears. I thought of my father, of the man I'd believed him to be, honorable, honest, brave. How could that man have lived a lie? Unless he hadn't known, unless he'd been a victim too, somehow caught in a web he didn't understand. Or maybe I was still trying to protect his memory, unable to accept that heroes can have dark secrets. I pulled out the photo I always carried. Dad in his uniform, smiling at the camera, me on his shoulders, Mom beside us. The perfect military family. The perfect lie? Tomorrow I would begin to unravel the truth. And whatever I found, whatever doors I opened, there would be no going back. The rain fell harder, and somewhere in Fayetteville, Patricia Reeves was living her life, funded by my father's death, protected by her lies. But her secrets were about to be exposed, and I would be the one to expose them. The catalyst had been set in motion. Now, there was no stopping what would come next.
The drive to Fayetteville should have taken 3 hours. I turned around twice before I even left Asheville city limits. Each time, doubt clawed at my chest. What was I doing? Confronting a woman who might hold the keys to destroying everything I believed about my father? About my family? About myself? Margaret's warnings echoed in my head. Don't compromise the investigation. Don't make contact. Let the professionals handle it. But the professionals would take months. And every night, I watched my mother's grief deepen, watched her question 30 years of memories. I couldn't let that continue. The third time I pulled over, I was shaking so badly, I had to grip the steering wheel to steady myself. A semi-truck roared past, rocking my car with its wake. I stared at my hands, my father's hands, everyone always said, long fingers, prominent knuckles, the same way of drumming them when nervous. Were they really his, or had my entire genetic identity been built on a foundation of lies? My phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. "Honey, where are you?" Her voice sounded fragile, like glass about to shatter. "Robert said you took the day off work. You never take days off." "I'm running errands, Mom. Research for the case." A pause. She knew I was lying. 26 years of being my mother had given her a finely tuned radar for my deceptions. "Sabrina, please don't do anything dangerous. Whatever you're planning. I'm just gathering information, I promise." "Your father," she began. Then her voice broke. "I keep trying to remember if there were signs. Late-night phone calls, unexplained absences, anything. But there was nothing. He was devoted to us. He called every single day when he was deployed. He never missed your birthday, never forgot our anniversary. How could he have been living a double life?" Her pain cut through my fear. I thought of the alternative, doing nothing, waiting, letting the bureaucratic wheels turn slowly while my mother tortured herself with questions. "I'll call you tonight," I said softly. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, baby. Be careful." I hung up and pulled back onto the highway, heading south. There was no turning back now. By the time I reached Fayetteville, my resolution was crumbling. The city sprawled before me, military town through and through, recruiting offices, surplus stores, pawn shops with windows full of dress uniforms and medals. Fort Liberty loomed in the distance, its presence dominating everything. This was where my father had been stationed when he met Mom. It was also where he'd supposedly married Patricia Reeves 3 years earlier. Had he brought Mom to the same restaurants, the same parks, the same places he'd courted his first wife? The thought made me nauseous. Cape Fear Medical Center sat like a gray fortress on the east side of town. I parked in the visitor's lot, hands trembling on the wheel. What was my plan? Walk up to the information desk and ask for Patricia Reeves? Follow her to her car? Confront her in the hospital cafeteria? I sat there for an hour, watching people come and go. Doctors in white coats, nurses in scrubs, families carrying flowers and get-well balloons. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that somewhere in this building worked a woman who'd stolen 15 years of benefits that should have gone to my mother. Allegedly stolen, I reminded myself. I was a forensic accountant, trained to deal in facts and evidence, but all I had were suspicions and a copied marriage certificate that might be fake. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know who you are and why you're here. Leave now. My blood went cold. I looked around the parking lot, suddenly feeling exposed. Someone was watching me. But who? How? Another text. This doesn't concern you. Go home to your mother and stepfather. Forget about the past. My hand shook as I typed back. Who is this? The response came immediately. Someone trying to protect you from making a terrible mistake. Your father wouldn't want you digging into this. Rage replaced fear. How dare this person invoke my father? I started to type an angry response, then stopped. Think, Sabrina. Think like an analyst. Someone knew I was here, knew why I'd come. Either they'd track me somehow, or... I looked up at the hospital windows. Was Patricia Reeves watching me right now? Had someone warned her I was coming? My phone rang. The same unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello, Sabrina. The voice was female, mature, with that deep southern accent Robert had described. I'm sorry we have to meet this way. Patricia Reeves? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Drive to Arnett Park, 3 blocks west of the hospital. There's a bench by the duck pond. Come alone, and I'll explain everything. How do I know this isn't a trap? A trap for what, sweetheart? I just want to talk. You deserve some answers. Your mother deserves some answers. The line went dead. I sat frozen, mind racing. This could be incredibly stupid. Meeting a stranger who might be a fraudster, who clearly has resources to track my movements. But she was right about one thing. I did deserve answers. I drove to Arnett Park, scanning for anything suspicious. It was a small neighborhood park, empty except for a woman in nurse's scrubs, sitting on a bench feeding ducks from a paper bag. Patricia Reeves looked exactly like her photos. Auburn hair now streaked with gray, kind eyes, soft features. She could have been anyone's favorite aunt. As I approached her, she patted the bench beside me. Sit down, honey. You look terrified. You've been stealing from my mother for 15 years. You committed fraud. Why should I listen to anything you have to say? She smiled sadly. Because the truth is more complicated than you think, and because I loved your father too. You were never legally married to him. Wasn't I? She pulled out a folder from her purse. This is the original certificate, Sabrina. Registered with the state of North Carolina, October 3rd, 1988. Daniel James Matthews and Patricia Ellen Reeves, married by Justice of Peace Harold Fleming in Jacksonville. I grabbed the document, studying it. It looked authentic. Raised seal, proper signatures, even the yellowing of aged paper. My father married my mother in 1991. He never divorced you. That makes him a bigamist and her marriage invalid. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. Your father didn't know. What? Danny didn't know we were still married when he married your mother. She fed another handful of breadcrumbs to the ducks. It's the damnedest thing, and I've lived with the guilt for 37 years. I sank onto the bench, legs suddenly weak. Explain. Danny and I met when he was 19, fresh out of basic training. I was 22, working at the same hospital I work at now. We fell hard and fast. You know how it is with young love and military boys about to deploy. We got married on a whim, thought we'd have forever. She paused, wiping her eyes. But marriage is hard when you're that young. He deployed to the Gulf, came back different, like they all do. We fought constantly. Finally, in February 1990, we agreed to divorce. He filed the papers, paid the lawyer. We went our separate ways. I moved back to Georgia for a while, started fresh. Then how? The lawyer Danny hired was a drunk named Marcus Webb. Took our money, filed the initial petition, then apparently forgot about it. The divorce was never finalized, never went before a judge, never got signed, never got registered. Danny and I both thought we were divorced, got on with our lives. He met your mother, fell in love for real this time, got married. I eventually remarried too. My head spun. You remarried? When? 1995. Thomas Kessler. We were together until he died in 2018. Her voice grew bitter. Turns out that marriage wasn't legal either, thanks to Marcus Webb's incompetence. The name clicked. Jennifer Kessler. The Virginia case. Patricia nodded. My daughter. When Thomas died, we discovered the same thing you just did. I'd never been legally divorced from Danny, which meant my marriage to Thomas was invalid, which meant Jennifer had no inheritance rights as a legitimate heir. We fought it in court, settled quietly. It cost us everything we had. But you kept collecting benefits from my father's death. Yes, and that's where I became guilty. See, I didn't know Danny had died until 2009, when the military tracked me down as his legal spouse. I was shocked. We hadn't spoken in 19 years. But when they told me I was entitled to DIC benefits, she looked away. I was broke, Sabrina. The fight over Thomas's estate had destroyed me financially. Jennifer wouldn't speak to me. I was alone and desperate. So I took the benefits, knowing full well they should go to your mother. You stole over $300,000. Yes, and I've spent every penny trying to make things right, hiring lawyers, fighting for Jennifer's legitimacy, paying for her therapy. She suffered too, you know, finding out her parents' marriage wasn't legal, that she was considered illegitimate by the courts. I stood up, fury boiling over. Don't you dare try to justify this. My mother struggled for years. She raised me alone on a teacher's salary. She worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat, and you... I know. Patricia rose too, facing me. I know what I did was wrong, but Sabrina, there's more you don't know. Things about your father that will hurt even worse than this. What are you talking about? She reached into her folder again, pulling out a photograph. Your father knew, Sabrina. Not at first, but eventually he knew. The photograph showed my father in uniform, arms around Patricia, both smiling, but the date stamp read 2007. 2 years before he died, 12 years into his marriage with my mother. We reconnected, Patricia said softly, by accident at a military funeral in 2006. He was devastated to learn we'd never been divorced. He wanted to make it right, wanted to file again to legalize your mother's marriage. But what? He was afraid. Afraid it would cost him his military career. Afraid of the legal complications. Afraid of what it would do to you and your mother. He asked me to keep quiet, promised he'd handle it after his next deployment. He died before he could. I couldn't breathe. My father had known. For years, he'd known and done nothing. You're lying, I whispered. You're lying to cover your fraud. Patricia handed me the photograph and several letters in my father's handwriting. Read them. They're addressed to me. He was trying to figure out what to do, how to fix the mess we'd both made. My world was collapsing. Everything I'd believed, every memory I'd cherished was contaminated by this revelation. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, voice breaking. Because you deserve the truth, and because... She took a shaky breath. I'm turning myself in to the Inspector General on Friday. I can't live with this guilt anymore.
But I wanted you to know the whole story first. Your father was a good man who made mistakes. So did I. The real villain in this is Marcus Webb, the incompetent lawyer who started this mess. He's dead now. Convenient for him. I stumbled backwards, clutching the documents. This couldn't be real. None of it could be real. I'm sorry, Patricia said. I'm so sorry. I ran to my car, gasping for air, the documents burning in my hands. My father had known. He'd lived with the lie, let my mother live in ignorance, let me grow up never knowing the truth. Who was Daniel Matthews really? And what else had he been hiding? The drive home was a blur of tears and rage and crushing disappointment. The hero I'd mourned for 17 years was a coward who chose convenience over truth. And now I had to decide, did I tell my mother everything, or did I become complicit in the lie, protecting her from a truth that would destroy her? The weight of that decision pressed down on me like a physical force. There was no good choice, no right answer. I'd sought the truth, and now the truth was destroying me. What had I done?
I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a roadside motel outside of Durham, an anonymous place where the clerk didn't ask questions and the walls were thin enough to hear other people's problems through them. I needed space to think, to process, to decide what came next. The letters from my father lay scattered across the faded bedspread. I'd read them a dozen times, each word cutting deeper than the last. Pat, I don't know how to fix this. Linda thinks we're married. Sabrina calls me daddy. How do I tell them our whole life is built on a lie? I'm a soldier. I'm supposed to protect them, not destroy them. I looked into filing for divorce and immediate remarriage, but the legal implications are staggering. Custody questions, inheritance issues, even my security clearance could be affected. I could lose everything. I know I'm being a coward. I know you deserve the benefits legally, but I can't bear to hurt them. Please, give me until I get back from this deployment. I'll figure something out, I promise. But he never got back. The IED that killed him also buried his secrets. Until now. My phone had been buzzing for hours. 17 missed calls from Mom, 8 from Robert, 12 from Margaret Chen. I'd ignored them all, unable to face anyone until I decided what to do. The truth would devastate my mother. Learning that her husband had known about the invalid marriage, had chosen to keep lying to her, to keep her living in legal limbo, it would destroy her. But keeping silent made me complicit in the same deception that had poisoned everything. Around midnight, there was a knock on my door. My heart jumped. Had someone followed me? I peered through the peehole to see Margaret Chen standing there, arms crossed, looking thoroughly annoyed. "How did you find me?" I asked, opening the door. "I'm a forensic investigator, Sabrina. Did you really think I couldn't track your credit card?" She brushed past me into the room, taking in the letters spread across the bed. "Jesus Christ, what did you do?" "I met with Patricia Reeves." Margaret's face went white. "You did what? Do you have any idea what you've compromised? If this goes to court, it won't matter. She's turning herself in Friday." That stopped Margaret cold. "She told you that?" I nodded, sinking into the chair by the window. "She told me everything, Margaret. My father knew. He knew the marriage was invalid, and he chose to do nothing." Margaret sat heavily on the bed, scanning the letters. Her expression shifted from anger to understanding to pity. "Oh, Sabrina, I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't help me decide what to tell my mother." "The truth," Margaret said firmly. "You tell her the truth." "The truth will kill her. She's already fragile." "Your mother is stronger than you think, and she deserves to make her own choices based on facts, not protection from pain." Margaret leaned forward. "Besides, this is going to come out anyway. When Patricia turns herself in,
When the investigation starts, when the lawyers get involved, Linda will learn everything. Better it comes from you, with compassion, than from some bureaucrat reading from a file. I knew she was right, but knowing and accepting were different things. There's something else, Margaret continued. While you were doing your unauthorized field investigation, I was doing actual work. I found Marcus Webb's estate records, the lawyer who supposedly filed your father's divorce. Patricia said he was incompetent, let the paperwork slip through the cracks. Maybe, or maybe, there's more to it. Margaret pulled out her tablet, showing me a scanned document. Webb's office was investigated in 1991 for financial irregularities. Turns out he'd been running a scheme, taking money for legal work he never completed, filing false documents, covering his tracks. He lost his license, served 2 years for fraud. So the divorce paperwork might never have existed at all. Your father paid for a service that never was rendered. Webb probably pocketed the money and hoped no one would follow up. She scrolled through more documents. But here's the interesting part. Webb died in 2003, before your father allegedly reconnected with Patricia in 2006. I frowned. So, Dad couldn't confront him about the failed divorce? The guy was dead. But he could have simply filed for divorce again. Nothing stopped him from doing it properly the second time around. Her eyes were sharp. Unless there was a reason he wanted to stay legally married to Patricia. What reason could he possibly have? Military benefits? Maybe life insurance beneficiary designations? I don't know yet, but something doesn't add up. She stood, pacing the small room. I think we need to dig deeper into your father's financial records, his military file, everything. Margaret, I can't. You started this, Sabrina. You crossed the line when you confronted Patricia. Now you need to finish it. She fixed me with a stern look. Tomorrow, you're going to your mother's house and you're going to tell her what you've learned. Then, we're going to file a formal complaint with the VA Inspector General. We're going to do this right. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, rehearsing different versions of the conversation with my mother. Each one ended with her heart broken, her world shattered. There was no gentle way to deliver this kind of devastation. At dawn, I drove to Charlotte. The morning traffic gave me time to prepare, but no amount of preparation could make this easier. I stopped at a coffee shop near my mother's house, sitting in my car, building courage. Robert's truck was in the driveway when I arrived. They were both up, probably hadn't slept well either. The door opened before I could knock. Sabrina! Mom grabbed me, pulling me into a fierce hug. Where have you been? We've been worried sick.
We need to talk, Mom. Both of you. They sat on the couch, holding hands, united in their concern for me. I stood across from them, the weight of what I had to say pressing down on my chest. I met with Patricia Reeves yesterday. Mom gasped. Robert's jaw tightened. She told me everything. About the failed divorce. About reconnecting with Dad. About... I couldn't say it. About what, honey? Mom's voice was small, afraid. Dad knew, Mom. He knew the marriage wasn't legal. For years he knew, and he didn't tell you. The color drained from her face. Robert moved closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders as she began to shake. No, she whispered. No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. I showed them the letters, watching as my mother read her husband's words, seeing her heart break in real time. Tears streamed down her face. Silent at first, then racking sobs that shook her entire body. He chose this, she said between gasps. He chose to lie to me. Every day, every anniversary, every time he said, I love you, Mrs. Matthews, he knew I wasn't really his wife. Linda, Robert tried to comfort her, but she pulled away. Don't. I need to process this. She stood on shaky legs. I need to be alone. She walked upstairs, each step heavy with grief. Robert and I sat in silence, listening to her bedroom door close, then lock. "She'll be okay," Robert said, though he didn't sound convinced. "She's survived worse." "Has she?" At least when Dad died, she had the comfort of believing he loved her, that their life together was real. "It was real," Robert said firmly. "Legal documents don't define love, Sabrina. Your father loved your mother, loved you. He was just too afraid to face the consequences of the truth. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. But it makes him human." Robert looked at me with tired eyes. "What happens now?" "Patricia is turning herself in on Friday. There's going to be an investigation, probably criminal charges. And Mom will have to decide if she wants to claim the benefits she's entitled to." "Entitled to as what? She was never legally his widow." The harsh reality of it hung between us. My mother, who'd spent 26 years as Daniel Matthews' widow, had no legal claim to that identity. The woman who raised his daughter, mourned his death, honored his memory, legally, she was nothing to him. "The VA might still grant her the benefits," I said, though I wasn't sure. "There's precedent for putative spouse claims, situations where someone believed in good faith they were married. But it'll be complicated." "Everything's complicated now." Robert stood, looking toward the stairs. "I should check on her. Robert, I'm sorry for all of this." He paused at the staircase. "You did the right thing, Sabrina. The truth was always going to come out. Better this way than in some courtroom with lawyers twisting everything." After he went upstairs, I sat alone in my parents' living room. My mother and father's living room, except they'd never been legally married. Photos lined the walls, chronicling a life built on a foundation of lies. Wedding pictures from a ceremony that had no legal weight. Anniversary celebrations of a marriage that didn't exist. My christening, my graduations, all the milestones of a family that was never quite real. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You did what you had to do. For what it's worth, I think you're brave. Patricia." Brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt like I had detonated a bomb in my own family. But there was no going back now. The truth was out, the damage done. All that remained was dealing with the aftermath. Friday would bring more revelations, more complications. Patricia's confession would open official investigations. The military, the VA, possibly the Justice Department would all get involved. Our private family tragedy would become a matter of public record. I thought about my father, about the burden he carried silently for years. Had he planned to tell us eventually? Had he lain awake nights wrestling with the same guilt that now consumed me? Or had he convinced himself that some lies were justified, that protecting us from pain was worth living in deception? I'd never know. Death had taken those answers with him. Upstairs, I could hear my mother crying, Robert's low voice trying to comfort her. The sound cut through me like a knife. I wanted truth. I demanded justice. I pushed forward despite everyone's warnings.
And now I had to live with the consequences. The threshold had been crossed. There was no going back to the comfortable ignorance of before. We were committed now to seeing this through, wherever it led. Even if it led to the complete destruction of everything we'd believed our family to be. I stood, gathering the letters, preparing for what came next. Friday was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare for Patricia's confession, for the investigation, for the legal battles ahead. 3 days to watch my mother's grief transform into something else. Anger, betrayal, maybe even hatred for the man she'd loved for 30 years. 3 days until everything changed forever. The journey had begun, and there was no stopping it now. Wednesday morning brought an unexpected visitor to my apartment. A federal agent named Special Agent Derek Morrison from the VA Office of Inspector General. He stood at my door in a dark suit, badge in hand, expression unreadable. Miss Matthews, we need to talk about your contact with Patricia Reeves. My stomach dropped. How did you... Mrs. Reeves contacted our office yesterday morning. She mentioned your meeting. He glanced down the hallway. May I come in? I led him inside, my mind racing. Patricia had moved faster than expected, hadn't waited until Friday. Agent Morrison sat at my kitchen table, pulling out a digital recorder. I need to record this conversation. You're not under investigation, but your testimony may be crucial to our case. Case against Patricia? That depends on what we find. He pressed record. Tell me everything about your meeting with Mrs. Reeves, starting from the beginning. I recounted the entire encounter, the threatening texts, the meeting at our net park, the documents Patricia had shown me. Morrison listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. Did she mention anyone else? He asked when I finished. Anyone who might have helped her file the fraudulent claim? No, she said she did it alone. She was desperate after losing her husband's estate. Morrison's eyes sharpened. You know about the Virginia case? My supervisor found it. Jennifer Kessler, Patricia's daughter. He leaned back, studying me. What else did your supervisor find? I hesitated. Margaret's investigation had been informal, possibly crossing ethical lines. Just public records. The settlement case, Patricia's employment history. Miss Matthews, I need you to be completely honest with me. This investigation is bigger than you realize. He pulled out a file, sliding a photograph across the table. Do you know this man? The photo showed a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, silver hair, expensive suit. He looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. No? Should I? Colonel Richard Hastings, retired. He was your father's commanding officer in Afghanistan. Morrison watched my reaction carefully. He's also been under investigation for benefits fraud for the past 8 months. My blood ran cold. What does he have to do with Patricia? That's what we're trying to determine. Colonel Hastings has been linked to at least 5 fraudulent benefits claims over the past decade. We believe he was running a scheme, identifying soldiers who had messy personal situations, exploiting those situations for financial gain. You think he knew about my father's situation? We know he did. We found correspondence between Hastings and Patricia Reeves dating back to 2009, right after your father's death. Morrison pulled out more documents. Hastings approached her, told her she was legally entitled to benefits, helped her file the claim. He took a 30% cut of everything she received. The room spun. Patricia hadn't acted alone. She'd been manipulated. Just another victim in a larger scheme. But why wouldn't she mention this? Fear. Hastings is a powerful man with connections throughout the military establishment. He's threatened witnesses before. Morrison's expression hardened. 2 weeks ago, one of our witnesses recanted her testimony, said she'd been mistaken about everything. The next day, her son received a full scholarship to a prestigious military academy. He's bribing people? Threatening them? We can't prove it yet. But, Miss Matthews, if Patricia Reeves is planning to testify against Hastings, she's in danger, and anyone connected to her might be too. The implication hung heavy in the air. My mother? Robert? Me? What should I do? Be careful. Don't discuss this case with anyone outside your immediate family and legal counsel. Don't try to contact Patricia Reeves again. He stood, handing me his card. Call me immediately if anyone approaches you with questions about your father, about the benefits, anything related to this case. After he left, I sat in stunned silence. What had started as a simple search for truth had uncovered a military corruption scandal. My father hadn't just been caught in administrative error. He'd been targeted, exploited, his messy personal life turned into profit for a corrupt officer. I called Margaret immediately. She arrived within an hour, and I told her everything Morrison had revealed. Hastings, she muttered, pulling up information on her laptop. I've heard that name. He consults for several military benefits law firms now, including... Her eyes widened. Whitman and Associates, the Virginia firm that represented Jennifer Kessler. He's connected to everything. Margaret's fingers flew across the keyboard. Look at this. Hastings retired in 2010, 1 year after your father died. Started his consulting business immediately. His client list includes dozens of widows and family members of fallen soldiers.
Many of them had complicated situations, prior marriages, custody disputes, financial irregularities, perfect targets for exploitation. We need to tell Morrison. He probably already knows, but we can dig deeper, find connections he might have missed. Margaret's investigative instincts were fully engaged now. Sabrina, I need to access your father's complete military file, his financial records, everything. There might be evidence of Hastings' involvement in his life before his death. How do we get that? Leave it to me. I have contacts at the National Archives. But there's something else. If Hastings targeted your father specifically, if he knew about the bigamy situation before 2009, then he might have been watching your father for years. The implications were chilling. Had Hastings engineered situations to create more fraudulent claims? Had he actively prevented my father from fixing his marital status? My phone rang, Mom's number. My hand shook as I answered. Sabrina, there's someone here, at the house. He says he's from the Department of Defense, wants to talk about your father's service record. But something feels wrong. Robert doesn't trust him. Mom, don't let him in. Lock the doors. He's already inside. He came while Robert was at work, said it was urgent. My heart raced. Put me on speaker. I want to hear what he's saying. I heard rustling, then my mom's voice. My daughter wants to speak with you. A smooth, cultured voice came through. Miss Matthews, no need for alarm. I'm simply here to help your mother navigate some complicated benefit questions. What's your name?
A pause. Colonel Richard Hastings. I served with your father in Afghanistan. I'm here to ensure your mother receives everything she's entitled to. Margaret grabbed my arm, her face pale. She mouthed, "Keep him talking." Colonel, my mother hasn't filed any benefit claims. Why would you be discussing this with her? Well, given the recent discoveries about your father's marital situation, I thought Mrs. Matthews, or rather Ms. Carson, as she legally is, might need guidance on how to proceed. The use of Mom's maiden name was deliberate, cruel. He was reminding her that she'd never legally been Mrs. Matthews. I think you should leave, I said firmly. My mother has legal representation and doesn't need your services. Does she? Because from what I understand, you've been conducting unauthorized investigations, meeting with witnesses, potentially compromising a federal case. The VA might view your family's claim very unfavorably if they knew about your interference. It was a threat, barely veiled. Margaret scribbled on a notepad, "Call Morrison now." Colonel Hastings, I have federal agents on the other line. They're very interested in speaking with you. A sharp laugh. I doubt it, but I'll leave your mother to think about her options. Mrs. Carson, my card. Call me when you're ready to discuss securing your financial future. I heard the door close. Mom came back on the line, sobbing. Sabrina, what's happening? Who is that man? Why did he call me Ms. Carson? Mom, listen carefully. Lock all the doors. Don't let anyone else in until I get there. I'm calling the police and the federal agent handling this case. I hung up and immediately dialed Morrison. He answered on the first ring. Hastings just visited my mother's house. He threatened us, tried to coerce him to work with him. God damn it. I heard Morrison moving, doors slamming. I'm sending local police to your mother's address right now. Don't go there alone. Wait for officers to arrive first. Margaret and I raced to Charlotte, following a police cruiser that Morrison had dispatched. When we arrived, 2 officers were already outside, checking the perimeter. Robert's truck screeched into the driveway moments later. "What's going on?" he demanded. Linda called me hysterical. Inside, Mom sat at the kitchen table, Hastings' business card in front of her like a poisonous snake. Her hands trembled as she held a cup of tea. He knew everything. About Daniel's first marriage, about the divorce that never happened, about Patricia. He knew things even I didn't know. How long has he been watching us? Years, probably. He's been running a benefits fraud scheme, targeting families like yours. He said he could help me get the benefits I deserve. Said he had lawyers who could argue I'm a putative spouse, that I acted in good faith. Mom gasped. Daniel never mentioned that. Possibly, I said. But not through him. He's a criminal, Mom.
He'd take most of the money and leave you with nothing. Robert put his arm around her. We'll figure this out the right way. No deals with criminals. Agent Morrison arrived an hour later, taking our statements, assuring us that Hastings would be brought in for questioning. But his face was grim. He's smart, covered his tracks well. This visit today, he'll claim he was offering legitimate consulting services. Without a recording, it's your word against his. So he gets away with it? I asked. Not if we can build a solid case. But we need more evidence, more testimony. Morrison looked at each of us. I'm going to be honest. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Hastings knows we're investigating him, and he's desperate. Desperate men do dangerous things. After Morrison left, we sat in the living room trying to process everything. My search for truth about my father's benefits had exposed a corruption network that had exploited grieving families for years. Patricia was a victim, not just a perpetrator. And my father, had he been targeted specifically because of his marital complications? There's something else, Margaret said, quietly. I got preliminary results from the National Archives. Your father's personnel file shows unusual activity in 2008. Multiple access requests from unauthorized sources. Someone was digging into his background a year before he died. Hastings was researching him, looking for vulnerabilities to exploit after his death. It appears so. But there's more. Margaret hesitated. Your father filed a complaint against Hastings in January 2009, 2 months before he died, claimed Hastings had approached him about financial planning opportunities that seemed suspicious. Mom gasped. Daniel never mentioned that. The complaint was dismissed as a misunderstanding. Hastings claimed he was just offering friendly advice. Margaret's expression was dark. 2 months later, your father was dead. The implication hung in the air, too terrible to voice. Had Hastings orchestrated more than fraud? Had he somehow arranged for my father's death? That's conspiracy theory territory, Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Morrison said when I'd asked him directly before he left. Or maybe your father's death was just convenient timing for Hastings' scheme. Either way, we're investigating every angle. As night fell, we were left with more questions than answers. The simple fraud case had become a tangled web of corruption, manipulation, and possibly worse. And we were caught in the middle, targets of a man who'd built his fortune on the grief of military families. The struggle had just begun, and the learning curve was steep, dangerous, and potentially deadly. But we couldn't turn back now. Too much had been revealed, too many victims identified. We had to see this through, whatever the cost. For my father's memory, for Patricia and her daughter, for all the families Hastings had exploited. Justice would be served, even if it destroyed us in the process.
The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday afternoon, 3 days after Hastings' threatening visit. I was at work when Margaret burst into my office, her face flushed with excitement and fear. Jennifer Kessler just called me, Patricia's daughter. She wants to meet, today. Says she has something that will blow the case wide open. We drove to a coffee shop in Greensboro, halfway between our locations. Jennifer sat in the corner booth, a young woman about my age, with her mother's auburn hair and frightened eyes. She clutched a leather messenger bag like a lifeline. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure who else to trust. "What's happened?" I asked. Jennifer glanced around nervously before pulling a small recording device from her bag. My mother kept insurance. She knew Hastings was dangerous, knew he might turn on her, so she recorded everything. Every conversation, every threat, every transaction over 15 years. Margaret's eyes widened. Everything? Everything. Jennifer pushed the device across the table. She gave this to me 3 days ago, told me if anything happened to her and should give it to the authorities. This morning, her voice broke. This morning, she didn't show up for her shift at the hospital. Her apartment door was open. She's gone. My blood ran cold. Did you call the police? They said she's an adult, probably just went somewhere without telling anyone. But I know my mother. She wouldn't disappear. Not now. Not when she was finally ready to make things right.
Tears streamed down Jennifer's face. Hastings took her. I know he did. Margaret grabbed the recording device. We need to get this to Agent Morrison immediately. As we drove to the federal building in Raleigh, Jennifer played portions of the recordings. Hastings' voice filled the car, cold and calculating. Patricia, you'll file the claim exactly as I instruct. You were Matthew's legal wife. That's indisputable. The benefits are rightfully yours. But his other wife... She doesn't matter. She was never legally married to him. You owe her nothing. Later recordings grew more menacing. If you're thinking of backing out, remember, I have documentation of everything. You'll go to prison for fraud while I walk free. You're threatening me? I'm protecting us both, Patricia. Don't forget that. The final recording was from 2 weeks ago. The federal investigation is closing in. I need you to disappear for a while. I have a place arranged. No, I'm done hiding. I'm going to tell them everything. You do that, and you'll regret it. Your daughter, your career, everything you've built, gone. Is that what you want? I want to do the right thing. Finally. Agent Morrison's face was grim as he listened to the recordings in his office. This is enough to arrest Hastings, but we need to find Patricia first. If he's taken her... He didn't finish the sentence. We all knew what it meant. There's more, Jennifer said, pulling out a thick folder. Bank statements showing payments from Hastings to my mother and from my mother to Hastings. Emails, text messages, everything documenting their arrangement. And this, she held up a letter, a suicide note Hastings forced my mother to write, dated last week. He was setting up her death to look self-inflicted. Morrison immediately mobilized his team. Within hours, search warrants were issued for Hastings' home, office, and a property he owned in the mountains near Boone. Police, FBI, and VA investigators descended on all locations simultaneously. I waited at the federal building with Jennifer and Margaret, watching the news reports of the raids on television. Mom and Robert joined us, offering what comfort they could to Jennifer, who was terrified for her mother's safety. The call came at 8 p.m. Morrison's voice was tired, but relieved. We found her. She's alive. Patricia had been held in a cabin in the mountains, drugged but unharmed. Hastings had planned to stage her suicide there, making it look like guilt over the fraud had driven her to take her own life. But our quick action had saved her. Hastings was arrested attempting to flee to Canada. The evidence against him was overwhelming, not just Patricia's recordings, but similar documentation from 6 other widows he had exploited over the years. His scheme had netted him over $2 million in illegal payments. The trial took place 6 months later. I sat in the courtroom with Mom, Robert, Patricia, and Jennifer, watching as Hastings' empire of exploitation crumbled. Witness after witness testified about his manipulation, his threats, his cold calculation in profiting from grief. Patricia took the stand, her voice strong and clear. I was wrong to take the benefits. I knew they should have gone to Linda Carson, the woman who truly loved Danny, who raised his daughter. But I was desperate, and Richard Hastings exploited that desperation. He made me believe I had no choice. She turned to look at us in the gallery. I'm sorry. To Linda, to Sabrina, to all the families I hurt by being part of the scheme. I can't undo the past, but I can try to make amends. Mom squeezed my hand as tears ran down both our faces. The verdict came swiftly. Hastings was found guilty on 17 counts of fraud, extortion, and witness tampering. The judge sentenced him to 22 years in federal prison. You exploited the sacrifice of American heroes, the judge said, his voice heavy with disgust. You turned their deaths into profit, their widows into victims. You deserve every day of this sentence and more. Patricia pleaded guilty to her role in the fraud, receiving a suspended sentence in exchange for her cooperation and the return of all benefits she had received. The judge acknowledged her role as both perpetrator and victim. You made poor choices, Mrs. Reeves, but you ultimately did the right thing. Your testimony helped bring down a predator who would have continued destroying families. That counts for something.
The resolution of my mother's benefits took another year of legal wrangling. The VA ultimately ruled that she qualified as a putative spouse, someone who had entered into marriage in good faith, believing it to be legal. She received a settlement of $400,000, representing the benefits she should have received over 15 years. But the money wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was the truth we'd uncovered about my father.
Yes, he'd made mistakes. He'd been caught in an impossible situation created by a negligent lawyer, then targeted by a predatory officer who'd exploited his vulnerability. In the end, he'd tried to do the right thing, filing a complaint against Hastings just before his death. "Your father wasn't perfect," Mom said one evening as we sat on her porch, watching the sunset, "but he loved us. That much was real, legal documents aside." Patricia and Jennifer became unexpected allies. Patricia used her settlement from the case to start a nonprofit helping military families navigate benefits claims, ensuring they weren't exploited by predators like Hastings. Jennifer and I worked together to create educational materials about benefits fraud, warning signs, and resources for victims. "Our father's situations brought us together in the worst way," Jennifer said at our first nonprofit fundraiser. "But we're turning that tragedy into something positive. No more families should suffer what ours did." The strangest outcome was the relationship that developed between Mom and Patricia. They met for coffee occasionally, two women who'd loved the same man in different times, different ways. They'd never be friends, exactly, but they'd found a way to peace. "Danny would be shocked," Patricia said once, smiling sadly. The two Mrs. Matthews, or rather, one Mrs. Matthews and one Ms. Reeves, actually getting along. "He'd also be proud of Sabrina," Mom added, looking at me with love and pride. "She did what he couldn't. She brought the truth to light no matter the cost." A year after Hastings' conviction, I stood at my father's grave in Arlington National Cemetery. The Bronze Star and Purple Heart gleamed in their display case at the memorial. I placed fresh flowers beside them. "I know the truth now, Dad. All of it. The good, the bad, the complicated. You were human. You made mistakes, but you also loved us and you tried to make things right. That's what I'll choose to remember." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the sound of a distant bugle playing taps. Around me, thousands of white headstones stood in perfect rows, each representing a life given in service, a family left behind. How many of those families had been targeted by people like Hastings? How many had suffered in silence, never knowing they were victims of exploitation? Because of our fight, because of the truth we'd uncovered, others would be protected. New safeguards were put in place at the VA, stricter oversight of benefits consultants, better support for widows and families. My father's messy, complicated legacy had led to real change. As I walked back through Arlington, past row after row of heroes, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. It had started with a simple question about benefits and had uncovered layers of deception, fraud, and exploitation. It had nearly destroyed my family, but ultimately it had also freed us. The truth had been painful, but it had also been necessary. Mom was legally recognized now, her years of widowhood validated even if her marriage hadn't been. Patricia had found redemption through confession and restitution. Jennifer had her mother back, alive and trying to make amends. And Hastings was behind bars, unable to hurt anyone else. As for me, I'd learned that seeking truth comes with a price. But some prices are worth paying. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "Dinner tonight? Patricia and Jennifer want to come too. We're thinking of expanding the nonprofit." I smiled, typing back my acceptance. From tragedy and deception had come purpose and healing. Not perfect healing. The scars would always remain, but we were moving forward, using our pain to protect others. And somewhere, I like to think, my father was at peace too. His secrets exposed, his memory complicated, but ultimately honored. He'd been a flawed man who made mistakes, but he'd also been a soldier who served his country, a father who loved his daughter, and ultimately a victim of a system designed to exploit the vulnerable. His story, our story, would help ensure that others didn't suffer the same fate. That was justice. That was resolution. That was enough. I drove away from Arlington as the sunset cast long shadows across the memorial grounds. Behind me lay the past. Complicated, painful, but finally understood. Ahead lay the future. Uncertain, but filled with purpose. The journey had been devastating, but it had also been necessary. And now, finally,
we could all begin to heal.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.